What is up, ninjas? My name is Semworld, and welcome to the complete guide to master Serum. This is going to be episode 4, and today we're going to be looking at the LFO section inside of Serum. Now, Serum is good at a couple of things, guys. It's good at trap sounds, dubstep sounds, wavetable synthesis, but the other thing that it's super good at is also the LFO that it has. If it wasn't for that LFO, I don't think Serum would have had as much success as it's had. Now, before this synth, I've never seen a synth that had this style of LFO, which is a free-flowing kind of LFO. What I mean by that is that a lot of synths, when you use the LFO in them, you have access to just a sine, a square, triangle, and then that's about it, okay? You don't have access to crazy stuff like this, okay? And of course, you know the standard saw and saw down. So Serum is the first synth that I've seen where you can actually alter the shape of it to do whatever you want it to do. And that is what makes it very strong. And today we're going to be exploring that, and you're going to be able to learn how to use it and know how to achieve the LFO modulation that you want. Now, LFO, guys, stands for low frequency oscillation, okay? That's pretty much what it is. It's going to be used to pretty much move knobs similar to the envelope, except LFOs aren't usually routed to the amp or the master amp of a synthesizer. However, let's assume you want a sound where you want it to change a certain way and keep looping. LFOs are there for you. Now, Serum is going to have a few modes that are going to change this, especially one of those, and today we're going to be looking at them. Now, like I stated, guys, Serum is a free-flowing LFO synth, so you can do whatever you want with it, okay? The first thing we're going to be looking at here is going to be the modes, the 3 different modes you can set this LFO up as, okay? The first mode is off, and this is good for whenever you want a sound to change and you want it to change and always keep changing. What I mean by this, for instance, let's assume that I want to add like a, I don't know, like a pitch change, and this is not something you would do unless this is what you wanted. But with the off mode, if I play a note, I get that. Then if I play another note, you can see it just, this blue line is where we're adding that LFO, and it just keeps going. So it just keeps going on with its life. However, if we go into the next one, which is the trig mode, which makes it still loopable, but it's always going to start from the beginning now. Trig. It always starts from the beginning of that LFO. This is very good for sounds where you want a specific modulation and you don't want it to just be randomly going off. You always want it to sound this way every time you hit. Off is good for, again, adding movement to sounds where it might be a pad, it might be like a lead where you want some cool stuff in it, and vice versa. Now, the next mode is envelope mode, and envelope mode is similar to trig, except for one thing, and that thing is that it won't loop. So if you want the modulation to just happen once, like an envelope, it won't keep doing this. As simple as that. That's the 3 different modes inside of Serum. Very useful. Again, off is good for, again, adding movement to a sound. You know, this is going to be a modulation that's not going to alter the sound completely crazily, because obviously you still want some tonality and some usability in it. But it's good for that. Envelope mode is good for modulations where you want it to always start in a certain spot and only happen once. And trigs are good for always starting from the same spot at the beginning and looping. So if someone wants to hold it down for a while and you want that modulation to keep going on and looping, trig is going to be the one to go with, okay? I will say trig and envelope are more popular than the off. I don't see many people utilizing off as much. But if you're a sound designer and you're very serious about it, a lot of times the difference between a good sound, a decent sound, and a good sound is the attention to detail when you use an off LFO on a sound that alters the way it moves. And I'll show you guys some presets I have that use that. Okay, with that being said there, guys, we're pretty much going to set this modulation up on the level here. Now, a lot of people will have issues with using envelopes. They don't like them, and that is totally fine. So a lot of people will like to use maybe the LFO to change, warp this sound, the saw. So you can put this into envelope mode. And you can alter the slopes between coordinate points that you can add by double clicking. Hold Alt to make it more exact. And you can also shape it, even though our amp is saying that we want it just straight out. Since we're modulating the level ourselves with an LFO, we still get that good vibe on it, okay? Now, other settings that are very important, and we'll stick to trig right now, are going to be to the right of that. We have Bpm mode. That just means beat matched. This is important because if we take it off, you can see that the values totally changed now into seconds rather than beats per minute. So you get 1/4, half a beat, and whatnot. This is useful for people that want to create automations that are smooth. like so. Let's assume you want to do something like that. If we have BPM on, when we do it again, these first few ones are a bit sloppy because they skip huge beats. Like it's just not like pop, 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 pop. It's like pop, 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 pop. So it skips like a good fundamental. So if you want to create something like that where it's smooth and you're increasing the rate over time, turn the BPM off. That's the best advice I can give you. BPM will make it in sync though, so that means it's always in beat. That's the cool thing about it. Okay, so that's BPM mode, and to the right you're gonna have the rate, which is the speed. 4 bars long, you're gonna have 1/2, 1/4. Those are very standard stuff that I think you guys would understand. Now below that we have the anchor, guys, and what I believe that is let's say you're playing a song and you decide to start in the middle of a MIDI note, then this guy will start in the middle here as well. Having that setting on will make it start from there, so that's important. But again, when it comes to a song and you finish the song, it's not really going to matter as much, so usually I just leave that on and don't worry about it. Now below that you have the trip, which is going to give you access to beats in between 1/2. Now you have 1/4 T, 1/4. These are just swingy versions of the half and the 1/4 in between them. Perfect 1/4. Think of it as sort of like a triplet, and then if we put dot, we have access to more in between. Okay, these are good for when you want to add swingy kind of vibes to it, but a lot of times, again, I don't find myself using them unless I'm making like a sidetrans bass on triplet mode or whatnot. Okay, so those are going to be the modes here. This is what they're for. Majority of the time, you're really not going to mess with these guys. You're going to mess more with this here. Now to the right of that we have the rise. Now the rise is super useful, as sometimes you want to have that effect where if you're playing a note, let's assume this is going really fast, and let's assume that's as fast as it's going to get, but you want it to slowly go in. The rise is perfect for that. Let's say I put the rise at 1 bar. It's going to easily bring in the LFO. So don't confuse that with the way that the speed of it, you know, it's the volume of the automation. So as you can see here, when we put the LFO, the blue outline is telling us where we're going, at the top being max. Well, this is going to slowly bring it in at the same rate, but it's going to slowly add the modulation in. This is good for, again, sounds where you just want to ease in a modulation, okay? To the right of that, we have the delay, and the delay is simple. It's just going to delay the modulation for however much you want it to. So if you want this to start after 1/8 or 1 bar, I'm hitting the note, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so it delays the automation. This is useful for creating sequences, and we will create a couple for this tutorial here so that you guys can know how to use the delay feature. To the right of that, we have the smooth. It smoothens out the LFO, so pretty much if it's very rough and very harsh, it kind of, you can see it kind of finds a little balance in between that, so the LFO is not moving as much, creating that harshness, and it smoothens out. That's all that is for. To the left, we have a folder where you're going to have access to different wave shapes. Let's say we want to saw up. These are just going to be presets here. What I recommend you guys do is if you guys buy sound banks, or you buy shapes, or you make a sound and you like a shape, save it. You can save it here, save shape, and then you're gonna have access to a folder like this, and you can create a new folder called my LFO shapes, baseline shapes, dubstep basses, LFO shapes and whatnot, which you can use. You know, I've currently have a couple from different companies, like Audio Seed sponsored me for a video where I promoted some of their presets, and I saved those because I really like them. Cymatics has a lot of LFO shapes. There's a lot you can find, so just check those out. ARPs, you know, slow the speed. These are useful for when you know what you want to go for and you just don't want to create this again over, so you can just load one up and start from there. So that's going to be that. Below that, we have the grid. This is fairly useful for creating complex LFO modulations. Let's say that you want to get it perfectly on beat. When you click, if you have a high grid, you can hold Alt, and like I said, this is going to give you access to more little points here that you can go to. So I'm holding Alt right now, it's sticking to it. So let's say I want to do this, and we're going to have this, and I want to create something here like maybe 4 bars, so I can do that. And look how fast I'm doing it by holding Alt and just clicking. If I were to do this without Alt and the low grid, like let's say a grid at 8th again, and let's initialize that, you're going to see the difference, like that I'm gonna the trouble I'm gonna have. So I'm gonna have to do this, and then there you go, then I'm gonna have to do this. Okay, there we go, and this is a bit off, so now I have to move this to the left. So you can see the Alt is really useful, and the higher the grid, the more it allows you to go in between those. Okay, So that's what the grid is useful for, and that's why you would want to know how to use it and utilize it if you're doing those specific kind of things. With that being said, guys, that's the standard of the LFO inside of Serum, and now let's make some sounds. First off, yes, last time we tried to make, I think, a bass house sound, or maybe I cut that part out, but now we can do it pretty well because we can kind of use the LFO to give it the shape we need. So let's lower that a couple octaves around there. Let's put this LFO shape here like so, and let's give it a bit of a rounded vibe, and we're gonna put that on the wavetail position. Let's put trig on. Again, we always want to start from the beginning because this is altering a bass house sound. Okay, cool. Let's go into the filter and also add it there. Put a bit of resonance. Let's see if we add 2 units in there. There we go. That's a dope one. We can now change the wavetable and find one we like. Let's try some of the spectral ones. Those are a little bit more interesting, like the, let's see, the squelchy effect. Now, be careful here with the automation. A lot of these wavetables, they'll have a lot of changes, so you want to find a spot and a modulation length that you like. It's trying to make a melody. Let's add another layer to this. Maybe here we can have it. Okay, we can move this more here. So we get more of that. So here we're shaping the sound because we have the filter and we have the LFO. You can see it's so much easier than using the envelope, right, to create them like we did last time. So that's what the LFO is really good for. Here we can maybe add this guy higher. Okay, cool. So that's a bass house sound there utilizing the LFO. Now, with a lot of these, you can do a lot of different things, guys. You can maybe say, oh, I want to alter the tuning as well. And it's just whatever you feel like would work. So if you move a knob and you like that, you're like, okay, I'm going to add the LFO on that. So, you know, here we can also use the LFO with like weird combs to get like weird. Oh, sorry if I blew your ears there, but you know, with combs and stuff, when we move them, they sound a certain way. Now, the other thing too is you can make sequences. So here we can turn this into envelope mode. Let's do something where it's like, like we'll just do a fast hit. We'll do a wub. Again, this is not going to be anything like crazy, but hopefully it gets the idea across to you. Let's lower it to 1 bar. And then let's do 16 grit so we can do little fast shots there. I can also just use a normal low pass, and let's move the modulation to be more. Cool. Okay, so the other thing too is let's assume we want to do 2 sequences. Now, if I hold Alt here and I drag this across, I can copy my LFO 1 to LFO 2. Here, let's just set this up so that you guys can see what I mean on how the delay works. So here I have this set to envelope mode. LFO 2 is going to be routed to the same thing as LFO 1. Let's just assume that. We'll go backwards though to give it a different sound. And yeah, we'll do that. Yeah, it's good. Okay, and then we're gonna delay it for however long this lasts, the bar. So now the rate there is a bar. So this one's gonna go first, and then the other one's gonna kick in. So you can see it changes the sound completely. So that's what the delay is really good for. Now, when in envelope mode, the other mode you activate as well is when you right click any dot, you can see we have access to new things. Like for instance, here we have a start point, so we can start the envelope from there. Okay. The other thing we can do, and let's set the start point here. Remove start point. We can set now a loopback point here so that we have the envelope loopable, but it doesn't go back to the beginning to loop. In fact, you loop a new part. So it just stays there. Also, when you activate set loopback start point here, let's assume you can always set the set loopback point here. So envelope mode has some really good stuff because it's kind of like the trig, but now you get to decide what part loops. So let's say I want loopback start point here, and I want it to loop back to here. So now we start here. So it's gonna start here. Okay, so these are settings that you can get accustomed. It's especially useful for like people making dubstep that like to make sounds they're going to use for the drop and they want to hold down one note or vice versa, okay? So that's one use for the LFO. All right, guys, so here I have a bandpass with a saw. Now let's assume you want this saw to be kind of like an arc. Okay, pretty cool there. Let's put a bit of decay. And let's make this have a little bit of another decay, a very fast one on the pitch here. Now the LFO, turning it off, this is what we can do. We can set this LFO here. And what we can do is set it off and make this a bar, so that way as I play the ARP, the filter starts to move slowly and it creates depth to the sound. That sounds so cool, as you guys can see. That's what we can do with it. We can set it to the phase. If we have a wavetable, we can also set it there if that's what you want. So that's what that is useful for. Now, one thing I do have to state is that some synths, some LFOs that you can see here are going to be bipolar. It goes in two directions. Now, when you have it set up like that, you can hold Alt, Shift, and click to set it unipolar or bipolar. This changes. So, like I said, you know, at the very top, it's max modulation. When we have it one mode, at the top, it's max modulation. It's going all the way to where you set it to. At the bottom is zero modulation or zero change. In unipolar, the center is zero change, the top is high change going to the right, and the bottom will be negative change going down. Okay, so keep that in mind. So this is very important. So again, you can set that, Alt Shift click here, so we can make the bandpass have a little bit more change going up and down if that's what we wanted to do. And now when we do, all right, so that's another way to use the LFO. Another way to use the LFO, guys, is we can add a lot like super saws and we can make them sound a bit dirtier. We're going to add this sort of like kind of saw to here. We're going to route one through a bandpass. Only part B. And now let's detune part B a little bit more. Put mono legato here. What we're going to do now is add that reverse pitch that we learned in episode 3. Let's lower release a bit. And now with the LFO, we can add this to the fine of these guys. And at a very high rate, we can... Okay, very cool. As you guys can see, we can do that with the LFOs. Those are some techniques you can do. You can also add it to the phase. Some sounds like squares, for instance. We can add that fast modulation to get some really cool sounds on it. Now, the modulation doesn't have to start right out of the get-go. We can add a bit of a rise to it, if you guys remember that. And we can play a melody. And let's lower that portamento down. And then that kind of wobble comes in. We can set it to 132. So we get that do-do-do-do-do-do-do, and you get that LFO coming in. That's what the rise is super useful for. You can also add it to the phase. Let's put it at 1/2. You know, very simple sound design. If you put a reverb on that, it's gonna sound fucking amazing, man. So those are filter uses there, guys. And the last thing we can also use filters for are, you know, pitches to, maybe you want to make a riser, for instance, and we can also do that. LFOs are super easy to use when you want to make risers. So let's say we want to make a riser that is 8 bars. We can do that here. Volume coming up. Let's put trig mode up. Okay, next thing, what do you want to alter? You want the pitch to go up? Then we can also add it there. Let's do it 4 bars or 2 bars. Yeah, oh, my ears are hurting. They're too high up. You can also do weird stuff if you want, like maybe have it just go bop, bop, bop. Put a sine wave, create some laser. Okay, so LFOs again are meant there to change sounds, you know. The last example I'll use is, let's assume that we make a pad and we'll just use whatever we can here. We'll do that, and then we'll put another digital one here. Detune the crap out of it. We can add the LFOs now in the wavetable positions at a very slow rate so that they... To add movement to a pad, you can also add it to the filter if you want. So that's what LFOs are for. I think I've tackled all the elements that an LFO has, so that you guys can learn how to use them. LFOs, again, are useful for adding movement to a sound, creating dubstep bass lines. Anytime you hear a sound that changes over time, like bam, anything, you can do it with an LFO. The important thing is being able to visualize the change and turning it into an LFO shape that you can utilize. And like I said, Serum has one of the best LFO shapes out there. Now, next episode, guys, we are going to be going over the effects section inside of Serum. Maybe I'll do half and half, make it a two-part, because there's a lot of things to go over. But once we have those, we will be able to make some really dope sounds, and then from that we will tackle other elements that are found inside of Serum, the more advanced warp features, as well as utilizing the noise to do a bit of vector synthesis with synthesizers, like synthesized sounds and vice versa. So make sure to stick around. I hope you guys are enjoying the series, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. You guys take care, and peace out.